So a monk goes to a hot dog vendor and says, "Make me one with everything." The hot dog vendor takes the hot dog out, puts everything on it, and hands him the hot dog. The monk gives the hot dog vendor $100 bill and waits for a couple minutes. Eventually he asks, "So where's my change?" And the hot dog vendor says, "Change comes from within."
That's very good.
Yeah, we haven't, what's that?
So
we haven't talked in a while, but I wanted to just fill you in as to what I've been doing. And one of the things that's really been a major, I had a plan this past year because of the extra time in September to really start doing the inner work, like really, really get into the work and the spiritual work. And I've written maybe 4 or 5 notebooks so far. And it's been rather interesting because part of it has been the clearing out of cobwebs, like dealing with the issues of like anger and fear and resentment and all that, all the negative, the neediness, and really getting into that type of work. And then flipping the script a little bit to start talking about coming from a heart place, being more grounded, being more connected with myself internally, my true feelings and how I live. And what's come from that is the empathy and compassion, seeing the world in new eyes. I like to say rose-colored glasses, because you start seeing the world for what it is. And the last, the first half of it was the negative work, and then the positive work has changed my focus a bit to the way that my life has gotten much better. It's been uplifted, and I'm much more present, and I'm much more aware of what's going on around me. And it's been great. But I mean, besides for this unique time in pandemic where we're actually I've been able to write because I have more time. It's almost as though I'm floating in a certain way, because I'm not, as much as I'm present, I'm very present, I'm very focused, and I'm very grounded. So I guess the question is, how do you make your daily life a meditation? How do you do that? And what does that look like?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of different ways to even articulate that question. So sometimes people say, how do I live a more spiritual life? How do I make my life a meditation? Is certainly one way to think about it. How do I uplift my life is another way to think about it. I think it's part of my way of answering your question. I want to go back to something that you said. I don't think making your life a meditation or uplifting your life or living more spiritually means seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. I think it means seeing the world and being fully in it. Being fully in your feelings when you have them, being fully in your relationships, in your interactions, in your actions, in your non-actions. I think there's something about the being that we're being, that we're aware that we're being, that we're aware of how we're being, what we're doing. So there's being and doing, but also there's the awareness of where am I at in this moment in my life? Like globally this moment, meaning, this stage of my life, but also like this moment. you know? So like you and I are talking in this moment, and we also have the awareness that other people may be watching or listening at some point. So for me, I guess the one word answer, and I think there is a one word answer, and then there are many, 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 almost infinite numbers of answers. The one word answer is awareness. Is that we go through our lives often on automatic pilot. We do things, we feel things, we think things, we say things. We have all kinds of mental states. Sometimes we're confused, sometimes we're clear, sometimes we're angry or upset or fearful. Sometimes we might be all those things on some level and not feel anything. I mean, we all know all of that. And often when we feel or do or act in these ways or say those things, like often it seems like they're our knee-jerk reactions in the moment to either whatever's coming up within us or whatever's coming at us in the world. So when we have awareness, when we go, oh, I'm about to say this thing's about to come out of my mouth, these words, this emotion, this tone of voice, I'm aware of that. And then the next step is choice. Do I really want to say that? Do I really want to say it the way I'm feeling? And maybe I do. Or maybe in retrospect, I go, oh, that didn't sound very thoughtful. That didn't sound very empathetic. That didn't sound very kind. Right? So there are all kinds of yardsticks about and advice and spiritual, you could call them protocols almost, about what you should say and when you should say it. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Can it be heard? You know, so we have all these different teachings that we can hold on to that cultivate how we want to be in the world, but also that we want to be in the world fully. So the key to all of that, to my mind, is awareness. Because then you have choices. So that's why in meditation, to me, one of the most powerful types of meditation is not just when you're watching your breath, but when you're aware that there's a space between the in-breath and the out-breath. There's a moment of rest. When you breathe in, see, to us, it's you're breathing in and out, you're breathing in and out, you're breathing in and out, you know. Well, to the mystics, you're breathing in, and the breath pauses or even stops maybe, or rests. And then the breath goes out again. And that's a natural process, so that there's a stillness. There's a point of repose between the inhale and the exhale. And it's not like we work hard to make it happen, because it's there. Many years ago, I was teaching a workshop at an event, and I was teaching this, and I said, breathe in, pause, breathe out, pause, breathe in, pause, breathe out, pause. And afterwards, when we had a little discussion, someone in the class, turns out a very, very close friend of mine, raised her hand and said, how was that for you? And she said, work. And I said, then I'm teaching it wrong. And I was teaching it wrong, because it isn't working to pause between the breaths. It's simply gently directing your awareness toward the in-breath and the out-breath and the pause in between them in both directions. That's all there is. And sometimes you notice it. Sometimes you notice that pause. And sometimes you don't. And if you don't, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. You don't flunk the space between the breath meditation. You don't. Because it's there. It's there, and it's there. I looked this up once. It's probably tens of thousands of times a day that we inhale and exhale, right? So that means that the space between the in-breath and the out-breath, and the out-breath and the in-breath, it means it's there and available to us tens of thousands of times in the course of a day. To me, that's pretty astonishing. Because what that means is that we're hardwired for serenity. It's in there. Yes, we're also hardwired for fight or flight, or for freeze, the deer in the headlights when something shocks us. But we're also hardwired to tap into our own state of serenity that is literally within ourselves. So over time, if we do the practice of watching the breath, noticing, is there a moment in there? And watching the breath go out, watching the breath pause for a moment. If we see that it does, but if we notice, and then watching the breath go back in. So what we're just doing is we're paying attention. We're paying attention. Now, in many traditions, that space between the in-breath and the out-breath is thought of as a sacred space. Some people would say the space of God. And so one of the ways to uplift ourselves, I think the primary way to uplift ourselves is to be aware. Now, we say pay attention, and I think for me these days, that's too strong a statement, because it's not like I'm paying attention now, I'm focusing now, It's more like the camera's set up and it captures what it captures. And yes, we can manipulate it, just as someone can making a movie. We can move in closer. We can move back more. There's this great shot in the movie Chinatown where there's a long shot of a house. And you're watching this house, and at least for me, it was long ago that I saw the movie for the first time, but you're thinking what you're watching is the house. And all of a sudden this car pulls up in the front of the frame, like in front of you. That's between you and the house, between your vision and the house. So I think that's a way to look at life, that things are going to show up on your radar screen. Things are going to show up in the frame. Like, where do you want to put the camera? And it can be a gentle decision. It doesn't have to be, this heavy paying attention. In fact, it shouldn't be, because what happens when I say, okay, I'm going to focus now? What happens is my body tenses up. When I say, oh, I'm aware. I'm noticing some stuff. Oh, I'm noticing. Look what happens when I breathe. My breath stops. I don't die. I don't fall over and faint. Feels like my breath just stopped. Now, I know that the longer that I do that practice, I don't mean the duration that I sit. I mean that the more years that I've been doing that practice, and there's a mantra that I use with it, and I'll offer that in a moment. But the longer that I have done that practice over the years, the longer the space between the breath feels to me. It's not as fleeting. So it used to be, I breathed in and then, and out came the out breath. And now it's like, oh, I'm actually sitting in this space between the in-breath and the out-breath for a moment. And, someone asked me this in one of my classes. She said, you often say, we'll meditate for a while, or we'll sit in this way for a few moments. And she said, as opposed to saying how many minutes, are you doing that on purpose? And I said, yes, because a moment is qualitative. It could be an instant, which is not to say that we don't have a schedule and we're not planning to meditate for a certain amount of time, or talk for a certain amount of time, or any of that. I've led programs in meditation, many programs that were very tightly scheduled. This is when you welcome people, and this is when you give an explanation, and this is when you lead them into meditation, and this is how long they meditate. I've done all that, but the experience should be qualitative. It shouldn't be like I'm looking at my watch while I'm meditating. It's what's the experience of it. So I really do think the main answer to the question of how to make my life a meditation is by cultivating awareness. Now, one of the best ways to cultivate awareness is through the practice of meditation. It's not the only method. You can perform acts of service. You can make any action that you do a meditation in the sense of being fully present in that activity, whether you are talking on the phone with somebody or writing something or chopping vegetables, that you're fully there in the moment. So in a way, that's what kind of makes your life meditation. And I'm just going to, since I talked a little bit about the space between the breath, the mantra that I offer people, which is Sanskrit, Soham, Soham. It means I am that, and I always think of the that as being capitalized. What's the that? The that is us. That's our essence. That is our identifying ourselves with our source and also with our highest potential. Now, what's interesting about that mantra is, first of all, you say it, you coordinate it with your breathing. So when you breathe in, you silently say so. And when you breathe out, hum. So on the in-breath, hum on the out-breath. With the awareness that there's a space between the in-breath and the out-breath. Now, even more interesting in some ways is you could also say it backwards. You could say hum sa or hum sa. And I was actually initiated into this mantra back in the early 80s. And I've been practicing it ever since. It's the only mantra that I offer to people. It's not associated with any particular deity, as many mantras are. And that sometimes raises a religious conflict for people. But also it's very simple and it's very profound. And the other cool thing about it is that the Sanskrit word for mantra repetition, it's not just that you say it when you're meditating, you can say a mantra, anytime. The Sanskrit word is japa, J-A-P-A. Now, Soham is called a japa. What does that mean? It means it's the non-repetition repetition. It's repeating itself within you all the time. That's the understanding. That mantra is going on. We're not aware of it, but it's going on within us all the time. So I find sometimes it's not so much that I'm repeating the mantra, that I'm repeating Soham as I breathe in and out. But sometimes it feels more like I'm noticing it, that it's in there. It's kind of like your heartbeat or your breath itself. They're always going on. If you're alive, you have a heartbeat. But when do you notice your heartbeat? When do you notice, for that matter, your breath? only when it's heightened in some way. Like for most people, unless you've had a workout and you feel like your heart is thumping in your chest, or you're highly anxious, or you're going through a crisis, most people aren't aware. They know they have a heartbeat, but they don't notice it. They know they're breathing. I always say, no, we're breathing all the time. I mean, we are. We wouldn't be having this conversation if we weren't breathing. But how many times in the course of a day do most people notice that they're breathing? Maybe when they're out of breath or they're short of breath. There's something going on unusual or challenging with the breath. So for me, the breath is the greatest vehicle because it's always there. I don't need to take out a book and find a practice. I don't need to go into a special kind of room. And yeah, there are meditation rooms and meditation halls, and you could set up a meditation space in your home and all of that, and all that's fine. But the truth is that you could be sitting anywhere in the world, or standing anywhere in the world, or walking anywhere in the world, or lying down anywhere in the world and noticing that you're breathing. I mean, it's that simple. So I think part of the education, part of the learning for all of us, part of the spiritual growth for all of us, is to demystify it. It's not that hard to change where you are in any given moment. And if you're asking the big question, which you are right now asking the big question, you're not saying, well, how do I make this moment a meditation? You're saying, how do I make my life a meditation? How do we do that? It's by consistently putting in the time and the effort and the awareness to get in the habit of shifting in to, oh, that's where I am right now. Oh, that's how I am right now. See, because making our life a meditation doesn't mean that we walk through our lives zoned out. And walking down the sidewalk on the streets of Manhattan, and an air conditioner falls on our head. It's not like we're out of it. It's the opposite. We're in it. We're in our life. We're in the moment. We talk a lot about being in the moment. And that's shorthand, I think, for being fully present. So like right now in this conversation, like I'm looking at you, I'm thinking about you, I'm aware that I'm talking, I'm aware of what I'm saying. I'm also aware that there are horns honking on the street. I'm aware of that.
So how does, in terms of how does one start? I mean, you have to have some awareness. I mean, we've talked about in the past about how people come into meditation. It's usually some way, there's some anxiety or there's some issue that comes up at first.
Sure.
And then eventually, for most people, and then they slowly make their way into meditation, and then all of a sudden life gets better. I mean, my story is that I was getting these headaches, and then meditation, no more headaches, right? Amazing, right? But in the same sense, how did someone start realizing from the point of getting better? So we do have the uplifting right there, to even more still to start realizing that their lives could be even better than that, or if they focus or meditate more. How do you go from this was a fix it was something that would cure an issue, from there to now if I keep meditating, I go towards the light, I start getting brighter, I start giving energy, and that's going to make my life even more fulfilling and uplifting. What is that bit that allows people to realize, I guess?
I think it's the experience. It's like I walked in the door because I had a headache. I walked in the door because I I'm having trouble at work, or my marriage is falling apart. Mine isn't, but that's one of the reasons people come. As I've said, we go around the group, and one person has an illness, and one person lost her job, and one person had a death in their family, and one person has a difficult relationship, or has a problem with their kid or their parent, or whatever it is. The people walk in, and you go around the room, and you say, why are you here? And usually it's stress, anxiety, mood, depression, grief, loss of some kind, change, unwelcome change, like a lot of people are experiencing, these days. And then often you get somebody, occasionally more than one somebody, who says, my life is fine. I have a good life. But it feels like something's missing. It feels like it could be better. It could be more, they don't know what. And to me, that's more alive. More, one of my favorite words, enlivened. We don't even use that word. What does that even mean? To be enlivened in your life. The word enthusiasm comes from a Greek word that means the God within. So I like to think that when people are enthusiastic, sometimes you see this with kids, they're so enthusiastic. It's like they're full of God. They're full of light. Not enlightened in a kind of, out there spiritual sense, but enlightened in the sense of being full of light. And I think what starts to happen is that people start feeling that as if by accident. It's like when you hang around somebody who's happy. If you're not happy, sometimes it's annoying that they're happy. But sometimes, you get in a better mood because they're in a better mood. And we all know that sometimes if you hang out with somebody who's in a really bad mood, sometimes like you start to feel like you're getting in a lousy mood. So what starts to happen is that people start feeling uplifted. They start feeling like, this is kind of odd. Like I feel better since I'm meditating. I don't know why. It isn't why I came. It just seems like I'm more present, I'm more alert, I'm more happy. It doesn't mean that all the problems in life go away. It doesn't ever mean that. But that I say this myself, but other people say it often. I feel like I'm more okay. And in fact, I feel like I'm pretty good. Even though there's this happening and there's that happening, So I think what happens is that people start getting the experience of that. I don't like to use the word contagious. Sometimes people say, well, there's an energy in the room and with the people, and it's kind of contagious and you catch it. And it's like, there is an energy in a space where people do spiritual practice together. And the reason that we connect to that is because there's an energy in us. And that energy, and this is literally classical philosophy from the East, that energy is asleep. It's in us, it's dormant, it needs to get woken up. And yeah, for some people, it's woken up when they enter the world. But for a lot of us, it's like, we're just kind of living our lives. And then all of a sudden, you have these experiences through the practices, through meditation, through acts of service, through acts of kindness, by hanging out with people on the spiritual path, by hanging out with great beings, if you're able to hang out with them, by being in places where spiritual practice happens and unfolds. I think one of the things that we're learning during this crisis is that you can create sacred space remotely. Who knew? I know that. I didn't know that you and I could do a Zoom call and meditate together, and then it's a sacred space. And you know, I've been doing it with a lot of people, 50 people, 100 people, and it's a sacred space. It feels as sacred, sometimes maybe even more sacred, than being in a room with people and closing your eyes for a certain amount of time and doing spiritual practice together. I think one of the reasons sometimes it feels even greater is because the need is greater collectively. People need to connect with each other. People need to connect with themselves more during this time. And, you know, that's a blanket statement, and most blanket statements are not completely accurate. But, and the other thing that's really nice, and we're going to try to find ways to continue doing this in all the places that I've been leading meditation and teaching, is that you could have people on from Florida, you could have people on from Connecticut, you could have people come on from Israel. You know, I mean, I have people who come on to my meditations every week from all over the place. At the beginning, I thought, oh, they must be New Yorkers. I've just never seen them before. You know? And then somebody says, yeah, well, I'm in Florida. I'm in Georgia. I'm in Virginia. So it's not limited to a particular space or a particular time. And that I think one of the great lessons is that we have the capacity, just by being embodied, by being humans living on this planet, that we have the capacity to go inside and uplift ourselves, and then to help and uplift others. And I think that's a responsibility that we have. I mean, you know, I never intended to be a meditation teacher. Told you that the other day. I took advanced courses because they were the only advanced courses, were the teachers training courses at that time, back in the 70s. And at some point somebody said to me, you should do this. So here we are, a few decades later. And I think it's a simple thing for people to be able to share. You don't have to be a trained meditation teacher to say to somebody, you know, I've been meditating and it's helping me. I feel like I'm more alive. I feel like I can cope with what gets thrown at me better in my life. That's a great gift.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So does that address your question?
Yeah, I think just being able to cope is a gift in itself. I mean, that's just having a more fulfilling life in general is definitely a benefit.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think I know from my experience, right, before you slow down, everything's moving very quickly, and you miss the moments, whether you're future projecting or you're beating yourself up about your past. I mean, it's a lot of what's going into your moment of experience at the moment it's happening, and a lot of times we can miss it. So I guess a lot of that has to do with the simple awareness of what's going on in the moment that it's happening, rather than saying, well, you know, this is going to benefit me for the future at some point, or what, I don't have a good recollection of what's going on because of some issue that happened in the past.
And what pulls us out of the present is the future and the past. So we are projecting into a future that may not even happen. So it's kind of fantasy land.
Right.
You know, and then the stuff that happened before, you can look at it with new eyes when you're in the present. My favorite thing about the present is that there isn't one.
Right.
I mean, when we say now, it's over. Now it's over.
It's like from Spaceballs, you know, when will soon be now, and soon it's that whole back and forth.
Yeah, James Brown said, when I say now is back there, you know, it's over. So, but we have a sense. We have a sense of being in the present. We have a sense of the now. And I think it's a mistake to try to pinpoint it because it's elusive. But we have a sense of being present, what that means. It's sort of more of a state than a time frame. I think ultimately that's what this is about. It took me, you know, I was meditating for a very long time when I realized that it wasn't so much about the practice, that the practice was a vehicle to the state, to your own inner state, to your own inner being, which is really you. But the practices are a vehicle to that, and it's helpful, and for many people essential to do them, but they're not the end of the game. They're the process. And the more that you're connected to your state, and I don't mean emotional state, I mean your state of being, the more that you're connected to that, the richer your life is. And it really is that simple. It's that simple. And I love what you said earlier. You know, it's not like it's a magic bullet. Like, you know, I came because I had headaches, and so meditation was the therapy I was offered. It was a treatment. Yeah, so maybe that's how you walked in the door. Like for somebody else, it's some other form of perceived stress or crisis in their life. But then, yeah, the headache gets better, and that's good. It's great. The nervous system calms down. That's amazing. That's wonderful. But those are fringe benefits.
Right.
They're not the end all and be all. They're great. I never discount the benefit of those things, of those gains. But don't you want more? And I think the answer to your question is, yeah, most people in my experience start to discover that there is more just in the process of doing what they were doing because they were hurting. So it's back to that old line of, do you want to be free of pain or do you want to be happy? You know, freedom from pain is great when you're in pain. Of course we want that. But there's more. And I think it's a natural inclination of people to want that once they see that it's possible. You know, it's like coming out of the underground into the light. You go, oh my gosh, I want to be in the light. I didn't even know there was light, you know, for a lot of people. It's true for a lot of people, you know, they don't see that possibility.
Well,
I've had people say to me, happy? Like, I can't imagine happy. I can imagine being okay. I can imagine not being upset all the time. I can imagine that. And, you know, my response is, well, I'll take that, you know. Because once you feel like you're okay, then the door is open to be happier, to be more fulfilled. I think that is, to use that word before, I think that's an important word. To feel fulfilled, to feel complete. You know, there's this concept in yoga of Satchit Ananda. So people call it Satchitananda. There's a famous teacher, Swami Satchitananda, but the principle, Sat Chit Ananda, what is that? So Sat is pure existence, it's pure being. You know, when sometimes you just feel like, I just am. Like we feel that. And not only through meditation, you know, you might feel that watching the sunset, you know? You might feel that at the ocean, in nature, or, you know, with someone that you really care about. We feel that. We feel alive. We feel that we're being. And then there's chit, which means consciousness, awareness. It also can mean light. I like to think of these little particles of light that sometimes you see in the air. I like to think of that as chitti, that it's those little particles of pure consciousness in the universe. And then there's Ananda, and Ananda is always translated as bliss. But I always think of it as completeness. It's contentment. It's like, I'm just fine. I'm fine the way I am, you know? So those three principles, kind of the nature of who we are. And so to have the experience of that makes us want to have that experience more.
Right. Well, I mean, self-acceptance is a major part of I think so, at least, of awareness, to realize exactly. It's humbling in a sense, because all of a sudden we start realizing what's really going on in our lives as it's unfolding, rather than creating the story that I am the greatest basketball player in the world, even though I can't dunk. You know, like that's not real. But in my mind, I can definitely go there, because once again, that's not being present. That's some dream of. But it's very humbling to realize truthfully what's going on.
Well, I think you're talking in part about self-awareness. So it's still awareness, but it's like I'm aware. So I'm aware of who I am in many ways. And as you're saying, that includes being aware of my limitations. And what's great about that is that I'm not the only person in the world. I'm not stranded on a desert island by myself, like Tom Hanks in that movie. You know? I'm not. So if I'm not good at something, or if I'm terrible at it, or if I haven't the clue of how to do that or think about it or even ask the question, there are other people in the world that can help me with that. They could teach me, or they could do it for me, or do it with me. And that creates so much more freedom in the world. Realizing, you know, who you are. And I think some of it is also being able to realize what you're good at without being puffed up about it. You know, to know, hey, I'm good at that. Not only can I achieve that, but also I could help somebody else with that. Maybe even teach them that, share that with them. So it does open up life. And you see how we suffer when we try to delude ourselves, when we try to push back against what is. Well, I don't want it to be that way. Well, it is that way. So you have a couple of choices. You have a couple of choices here. You can be with what is and figure out and arrive at how you're going to do that. How you're going to be with that. What you're going to do about it if there's something to do. What you're calling acceptance or self-acceptance. Or you can rail against it and be unhappy and be angry and be miserable. You could choose to do that. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can. It's a choice. So I think one of the things that we learn from doing these practices is that if I can be with what is at this moment, whatever that moment is, And if I can be with what is in any moment, and I think that's part of the question that you're asking today, then I'm going to suffer less because I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to try to make it not be the way it is, because it is the way it is. It doesn't mean we don't try to change things when we can change them. And it doesn't mean that we don't try to do better. It's not passive. It's acceptance and recognition. It's like, okay, this is what I got. Now what? Because that's not a miserable position. That's actually a powerful position. Even in the face of something that we don't have the power to change, which is what a lot of people are noticing right now. I can't make it not be the way it is right now.
Right.
It's the way it is. I don't want it to be that way. I wouldn't have chosen it to be that way, but I'm not going to pretend that it's any other way. And we see in our world, in our society, in our country, what happens when people behave that way and think that way. There are consequences. It's hurtful. It's destructive. And it's also self-destructive for us who want to be more actualized in the world, want to be more fulfilled, want to be kinder, want to be happier. It's not about getting our way. Sometimes it might be.
Don't let down from a good fight, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not about martyrdom and it's not about passivity. You know, one of my favorite lines in the spiritual literature is in the Bhagavad Gita, where it said, it praises someone for being engaged in action, in inaction, and inaction in action. So it doesn't mean you're passive when you're not doing anything. It means you're actively not doing anything. You're actively still. You are actively quiet. And when you're engaged in an action, when you're doing something, you should be doing it with as much equanimity as you can muster. That there's an inner stillness, whatever you're doing. And I think this is what you see in, in frontline workers and crisis workers. Like, you have to have that stillness within you. Someone just told me a story about having a medical emergency, and that the people that were treating her through this crisis were completely attentive and fast and thorough, and there was also a kindness and a stillness to them. And I think that's how we want to live our lives, whether it's crisis, whether the trees are coming down in the hurricane, or whether we're at a party and it's fun. Someday we'll be at parties again. In the meantime, this is a party.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, do you want to lead? We're just running out of time a little bit, but do you want to
Sure.
do you want to lead a meditation?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah. So, in the spirit of what we're talking about today, I think it'd be great to just close our eyes. And become aware of whatever's going on or not going on. And not to focus on the not going on, but just to notice what it feels like to be in your body at this time, to be in whatever space you're in at this time. Maybe there are sounds going on or sensations. If your eyes are closed, Maybe you're seeing something in your mind's eye, or if your eyes are open, you're seeing something in front of you. And just noticing that. Maybe you note it in words. Oh, there's a sound outside, or I had this thought, maybe. Or I feel energy around my knee. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just a sense of what's unfolding at this moment. And one of the things to be aware of is that you're breathing at this time. And you don't have to put a hard focus on your breathing, just to notice that you are in fact breathing right now. And maybe you're breathing in a particular way or a particular rhythm. With openness and curiosity and acceptance. So you don't have to figure out whether you're breathing through your nose, your mouth, or what's the right way or the wrong way, but just say you're breathing. You just are. The breath is naturally coming in and going out. And as it does, the breath comes in and out. You might be aware that between the in-breath and the out-breath, there's a pause, there's a space. It might feel very fleeting at first. And it's okay. You don't have to work to find it, it's there. If you notice it, it's great. If you don't notice it, maybe you will another time, another round of breathing. So we're just breathing in and out and noticing that as we breathe in, there's a space before the breath goes back out. And in the same way, when we exhale, there's a space or a moment or a pause before the breath goes back in. And for a moment, we'll just be aware of that. Breath coming in and going out with a space in between. And if you like, you can coordinate your breath, pair your breath with this very simple yet profound mantra, so hum, by silently saying so as you breathe in and hum as you breathe out. Hum on the out breath, so on the in breath. So as you breathe in, hum as you breathe out. And in the same way, you may be aware of that space between the in-breath and the out-breath. If the mantra falls away, that's fine. And once again, so on the in-breath, hum on the out-breath. Aware that there's a space in between. And this is something you can practice on your own, virtually anytime. So connecting with the breath once again. And if you like, you can take a deep breath in and let it out fully, letting your breath find its natural rhythm. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
That was very wow, I disappeared there for a moment.
Yeah, it's powerful
Thank you.
and simple. You could do it for an hour. You could do it for a few minutes. It's fine. I just always say, if you do it when you're driving, keep your eyes open.
Well, thank you so much for this call, and
Thank you, Matthew.
and we'll I'll speak to you. I'll speak to you soon.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well.